And here is where today's fight is going to take place, the first big shakeout among the favourites on the Tour's first summit finish. 150 kilometres of flat to start the stage after it leaves Castres, then two tough climbs at the back end. First, the super category Col de Paillere, 2,000 metres high and 15 kilometres long. Then as soon as the riders are down the other side of that, they'll start the climb up to Aix-les-Trois-Domaines. The Tour de France keeping Pyrenean ski resorts in summer business since 1911. Now, second Saturday of the race, first summit finish. That seems to be the formula on the Tour these days. And it's a neat enough formula, signalling the end of a fabulously entertaining first week and the start of the race among the real contenders for overall victory in Paris. The small gaps from the team time trial in Nice are all that separate the big names coming into this stage, but by the time they get to the top of Aix-les-Trois-Domaines, the standings are going to look very different. Now, Daryl Impey kindly carries the yellow jersey into the mountains for whoever's going to take it off him, because the first certainty of today's stage is a change in the race leadership. Chris Froome is just 8 seconds behind Impey and will be minutes ahead of him by the end of the day, so he's the best placed of the big names to be in yellow tonight. Also 8 seconds back is Richie Porte, who's not just Froome's chief help in the mountains, but a tactical weapon for Sky to deploy, and a genuine contender himself should his leader falter. Alberto Contador is next, 14 seconds off the race lead, and has 3 Saxo Tinkoff teammates around him. Roman Kreuziger, Nicholas Roach and Michael Rogers. Sky might not have it all their own way as the one-strong team at the front of this race. Garmin are mob-handed as well. Ryder Hejjedal is the nominal leader, but there's Andrew Talansky riding his first Tour, and Dan Martin having the season of his life. They're all at 22 seconds. 3 seconds behind them, Movistar have Alejandro Valverde, who's capable of winning in the mountains, and Nairo Quintana, who's capable of winning the Tour one day, although he's carrying injuries from his crash-filled first week. At 31 seconds is BMC's twin threat, possibly to themselves. 2011 Tour winner Cadel Evans and last year's white jersey winner as best young rider TJ Van Garderen. Evans has the seniority coming into this stage, but the mountains will decide their real leader perhaps as early as today. 2 seconds behind them is Joaquim Rodriguez with Danny Moreno for help. He may not have the support around him that some of his rivals do, but he makes up for it by being the most exciting attacking climber in the world. And right behind Rodriguez is the real wild card in the field. Andy Schleck's long rehabilitation from injury has relieved him of the burden of expectation. If he's racing a couple of kilos lighter psychologically, then he could stir things up today. Now, 188 riders rolled out of Castres this morning, so we lost no one overnight. And of course, as well as the race for the overall today, there's the glory of a stage win, or at the very least an heroic failed breakaway for whoever manages to make it into the break. And interestingly, Christophe Riblon of AG2R did make it, because he won the stage from a break the last time the race came to Aix-les-Trois-Domaines in 2010. With him were 2 other Frenchmen, Rudy Mollard of Cofidis and Jean-Marc Marino of Sogerson, and everyone's favourite Dutchman, Johnny Hogeland of Vacances Soleil. Now, Hogeland led the fort through the intermediate sprint at 119 kilometres, and the best part of 5 minutes later, André Greipel led Peter Sagan and Mark Cavendish in the sprint for 5th place. So Greipel nips 1 point off Sagan's lead in the green jersey competition, and Cavendish slips 1 point further away. Now, once the breakaway hit the Col de Paillere, it broke apart. Christophe Riblon was the lone survivor out front as the other 3 fell back into the pack. Robert Hazink attacked off the front to try to get across to Riblon, and almost inevitably Thomas Verkler launched an attack too. Sky were at the front of the main field, but not in as great numbers as might have been expected. Edvald Boassenhagen went early, so did Costa Schutzu, and David Lopez peeled off earlier than we might have expected. So just Vasil Kirienka and Peter Kenyuk pacing Froome and Porte. And the yellow jersey of Daryl Impey is still in the main field as we join the race, with just under 8 kilometres to go to the summit, and Riblon still a minute 22 ahead.
And we're hearing now that the winner of last year's Tour of Italy, Ryder Hejjedal, the Canadian on the American Garmin Sharp team, has just been dropped by the main field as well. So they really are sorting out the men from the boys.
Now this is Quintana. This is the Colombian rider we had talked about. Now this could really put the cat amongst the pigeons.
Well, this will also be the test just how bad is his knee, because he's been having a knee treatment because of injury in the Tour where he crashed early on, but now he's gone. And Daryl Impey now, as they've lifted the pace because they'll be interested in the move by Quintana, it's put the yellow jersey into big trouble here. He's digging as deep as I think he can.
Well, he's not reputedly one of the great climbers of the world, but he will do everything he can to stay in contact. Look how quickly this Colombian rider has come across the gap here to Thomas Voeckler. Voeckler doesn't even know what's come past him at the moment, but it's a Colombian express. So Riblon now must understand that there's a little bit of an excitement going on behind him. He leads Robert Gesink by 49 seconds, but Nairo Quintana from Boyacá in Colombia has passed and dropped Thomas Voeckler. Voeckler could do nothing to stay with the tempo of the slightly built Colombian rider from the region of Boyacá. I think we are going to see the revelation of Colombian cycling coming to the fore in this year's Tour de France.
He's ridden right up to Robert Gesink, the Dutchman, and with a different pedaling style, a different pedaling ratio, he just gets on with the job. Gesink has decided to try and hang on to him. I wonder if he can.
Well, as we look into the face of Vasily Kirienka, he is just setting the tempo. As we look here at the yellow jersey, he started the day in the yellow jersey with just a few seconds advantage over Edvald Boasson-Hagen, but he knew today would be the big sort out. But this man from South Africa, the first South African ever to wear the yellow jersey, is a proud wearer of that yellow jersey. He will battle to stay in contact for as long as he can, but this is a stage where we will see a lot of damage done and big time gaps starting to appear.
Well, look at this. He tried to lift his pace, but this boy has just kicked again. Now, that was what Paul Sherman was explaining earlier. A born climber can keep a steady rhythm and then kick it up a notch, and the non-born climbers can't match those accelerations. This is Voeckler, who's now been dropped here. He's even behind now the yellow jersey. So he tried, but he cracked.
This is quite phenomenal now, this move by Quintana.
Well, we're definitely seeing the emergence now, taking a bottle casually, as you like. I think this man had ridden 10 tours. Robert Gesink has gone back to the peloton now, blown away, and that leaves just two riders up front now, and they're shortly, and I suggest momentarily, are going to be together. Here they come, and it's happened with 5 kilometers or 3 miles still to climb.
Well, if you look at the face of the Colombian rider in second position, soon to be in first position here, he's not showing any emotion at all. He's a phenomenal rider. Looks across at the Frenchman and says, come on, let's keep going together. But the question mark to me is, can the Frenchman stay with this Colombian rider once he starts to make the big accelerations? As we go back to the peloton now and look at Team Sky, they're looking after their leader, Chris Froome. One of the riders there had dropped back to the main, but now Riblon is in difficulty. He cannot stick with the pace that is being dictated here by Quintana, and he's been dropped. Around the steep corner, he's gone round the steepest part of that bend there through the inside, and he's now dancing away. And he could be the new leader of this bike race at the end of today, because he starts the day 25 seconds down on the overall lead of Daryl Impey. Pierre Rolland, Frenchman, who now thinks that it's his turn to have a little go to try and get across the gap. He was the winner of the Alpe d'Huez stage in the Tour de France a few years ago. He now is chancing his arm at trying to get off the front of the group.
Well, I see the motorbike referees there pushing us all on as they're trying to bring Pierre Rolland through the melee of motos. And there's now an attack from Euskadi here now, trying to put in an attack to reach first of all Pierre Rolland, and this has caused a serious pickup of tempo here. Too many riders slipping off the front now, and Team Sky, Kirienka, having to try and lift this pace.
Now it's the turn of Pierre Rolland to catch Riblon. He will move up into second place on the road. But he's still looking at 40 seconds to get himself across to Nairo Quintana.
There is Chris Froome. Where's number 1? Because the man who won last year, his teammate Wiggins, is not here. And Froome finished second in the Tour de France.
Well, Peter Kennock from the Isle of Man is up there still with Chris Froome. Riblon is about to get caught by the front end of a charging main field. I haven't yet seen Andy Schleck, so that's quite a good piece of information to figure that Andy Schleck has probably survived so far. Alberto Contador is still in this group. He's got Michael Rogers, the Australian, in him for help. But we've still, Phil, once we crest this climb, we've still got another climb to go.
We have indeed, but this is the highest point of this year's Tour de France, and because of it, this man here could be in for the richest payday of his life, because there is a 5,000 euros additional prize, the Souvenir Henri de Grange, the man who founded the Tour de France. And it looks to me as though Quintana is not going to be caught before the top of this climb.
Igor Anton, Euskaltel-Euskadi, he tried to make that move, he tried to get himself across that gap, but currently he's going nowhere. He's about to get picked up by the yellow jersey group, which is now hovering at around about the 1 minute mark.
We are witnessing a new climbing sensation in the Tour de France. First time he's ever been here. And straight ahead on the next little rise amongst the snow there is the summit of the high spot of the Tour, the Col de Paille. And isn't it fitting that the newcomer, the best climber we've seen in years developing, is going to win?
Well, it casts my mind back, Phil, to the 1980s, and you think about the climbers like Lucho Herrera and Fabio Parra. That was when Colombia dominated these Grand Tours, especially in the big climbs. Whether it was the Tour de France or the Vuelta a España, they produced some magnificent climbers. This is part of a new breed, and I would say over the last couple of seasons, we have really seen the renaissance of Colombian cycling on the international circuit.
And with this victory alone on the top of this first climb, the 25 points will give him the lead in the King of the Mountains. And who would dispute that today? This is Pierre Rolland, who's still staying clear of the peloton. That's a good second place. And in fact, having just awarded the King of the Mountains lead, with Rolland taking 20 points for second, he will hold on to the lead briefly. What will happen on the next climb, though?
Well, it'll all go down to the final climb, and the final climb as a first category climb will have its points doubled. There's 20 points for the final climb of the day, which is a first category climb. But this man has just gone over the summit, 30 seconds adrift. Now look down into the valley before. That is below. That is where we have to dive down to right now before starting the final climb of the day.
Igor Anton, is he going to hold them off just to get third place? I think he will. And then Peter Kennog, who's done an absolutely sensational round of pacemaking before Team Sky, comes up to the summit as well.
So third place there for Igor Anton. Still no serious response there for the Team Sky riders. I make that 1 minute and 3 seconds over the summit.
So the peloton, some 30 riders strong, will now zip up those racing jerseys, keep the chill air out, and descend to the valley below.
So as we go over the top of that climb there, it was Alejandro Valverde was right up in there in the mix. He's just sitting there quite comfortably. He's got a very good tactical position to be in. His own teammate, Nairo Quintana, the 23-year-old from Boyacá in Colombia, is in the lead.
Well, Cadel Evans is down there. You can see him in those red shorts, but his reliable teammate who finished 5th last year, TJ Van Garderen, has only just topped over the Col de Pailles. It looks as though Quintana is taking 1 or 2 risks here, and he might be losing time because he's not getting his line quite right. He's going into the corner wrongly. 4:24, they've been out on the saddle now. Not long to go to the finish, but a climb up to the line.
Well, the other disadvantage he has, Phil, as he goes down this descent, he's a very lightly built rider. He only weighs in at 59 kilos. That's about 130 pounds compared to 70 kilos for some of the other guys.
The chase is on here, 21 kilometers to go. It was over a minute over the top of the climb, but it is a fantastic riding by the Isle of Man's Peter Kennog, who is slowly reeling the breakaway in of Quintana. Just behind is Thibaut Pinot, the big French hope, but it is the hard-working Kennog who is bringing it down to 50 seconds now. On the chase down the mountain, they pull back about 15 seconds of Nairo Quintana's advantage. He's appearing not to be a great man going downhills.
Well, the advantage of having a strong team is you can sit in the slipstream of your team, and there's still two very strong riders in second, third position there for Team Sky. Richie Porte, who is well up in the overall standings, is sitting right in front of his teammate, Chris Froome. So Quintana, 23 years of age, comes around that corner, accelerates again. As I said, this is a pretty technical descent. We're here looking at the 23-year-old Thibaut Pinot, won a stage of the Tour de France last year and finished in 10th place in the overall standings. His team management were told off a little bit for putting a 22-year-old into the race, but they looked after him and nursed his way through his first participation in the Tour de France. This is Nicolas Roche coming back, and it was his birthday just the other day. His father won the Tour de France back in 1987. Using his experience, he wants to try and get into the gap, into that group on the descent, hopefully to help his team leader Alberto Contador on the early slopes of the final climb of the day, the climb to Aix-Trois-Domaines. So Quintana around that corner once again.
Well, this is Pierre Rolland here, who is currently back in the lead in the King of the Mountains competition with his second place finish over the climb, and one climb still to come. He's trying to push on. He's not a bad descender, Pierre Rolland. He should be eating into that advantage of Quintana. But look at this. The Sky team from the United Kingdom are still being led down the charge by one of their young first-timers, Peter Kennog. And it's the way they are descending that he's eating into the lead of the Colombian.
Rolland is still halfway across the gap. He's at 26 seconds, but the group containing Chris Froome is 45 seconds back, so only 15 seconds are separating them from Pierre Rolland. Taking good lines around the corner, but even Pinot seems to be not doing too badly, and it may well be a chance for them to come together in the valley.
Well, a little bit of a surprise that Pinot, but he's taking a few risks on the way down this mountain, and he might well bridge the gap before we start the last climb of the day.
It's got some pretty steep gradients in it, though, where once we start to get onto it, yes, it might only be 8 kilometers, 5 miles long, but as we start, it starts off at a 9.2% gradient. Once they get halfway through the climb, they go to 10.5% gradient. I would think there's a lot of discussion going on with Team Sky to try and figure out what's happening, but you see they've not been rattled. They've kept themselves together as a solid block for as long as possible.
Peter Kennog there continues to drive on, a World Team Pursuit champion on the track last year. And we're watching here the new roadman from Colombia, Quintana. He's beginning to run off that mountain now as he continues down towards the bottom, and there's still no signs of anybody joining him. 10.6 kilometers to go. We're still on the descent. The climb up to the finishing line starts at about 9 kilometers to go. The actual finish of the climb just before we reach the finishing line of the race today. And they are coming back slowly but surely, and it is all down to the incredible chase back by the Isle of Man's Peter Kennog. At times he is going so quick, he's leaving the rest behind.
Yes, but that's not a very big group of riders, but all of the major favourites before the start of the Tour de France are in that group. Quintana now from Colombia, the region of Boyacá, at 3,000 meters in altitude, drops down into Aix-les-Thermes.
Under 10 kilometers, this could be the first rider to pick him up. Pierre Rolland, he's got to get on now, because in a minute's time we're on the climb out again, and I suspect that Rolland might fall back again. There's the peloton. They are under 10 to go. You can throw a blanket over them all, but they're desperate now to make contact with Quintana before he gets on the climb. Now Rolland at the start of the climb has come up behind Quintana. Very determined chase.
There's the white jersey, the youngster from Poland, Michael Kwiatkowski, who sits in that group, and he, at the moment, as we start the climb, is the best placed rider in this leading group of riders. Started the day in 5th place overall, 6 seconds down. The two leaders now, they're moving all of the motorbikes and the photograph cameramen out of the way to keep this gap nice and clear as they start to charge up this climb, which in the early part has gradients of around about 8.5%. The second kilometer of the climb is very, very steep at 9.2. And as we get to the steep gradient, the Colombian climber puts time between himself and Rolland.
Well, this is amazing. He won't even let Roland recover or help him. He doesn't want anybody with him at all. In the distance there is the head of the race of that bunch of around 30 riders.
Well, Phil, whenever we have seen there's a Colombian flag over to the right-hand side of the road, whenever we've seen Colombian riders come, we've seen the incredible acceleration they've got on the steep gradients. I'm not sure that there's many people in this race have got the acceleration of the 23-year-old from Boyacá in Colombia. He really has got an incredible style when it comes to climbing. It makes it look so easy.
He certainly does. I've never seen anybody climb quite as freely as this man. But just look at this. When he senses the pace is easing, he jumps out the saddle, accelerates. This is Peter Kennog, then Richie Porte, the Australian last man standing for Chris Froome. That's the way they think about it. Kwiatkowski is slipping away. His white jersey could be moving off his shoulders now to Quintana tomorrow, but Kwiatkowski's had a great ride.
Look at the face of Kennog from the Isle of Man here. He is burying himself for the team. He's turning himself inside out, but shortly you will see a little bit of a turnaround. There's Van Garderen at the back, wearing number 39. He's got a teammate alongside him who wears number 36. That's Steve Morabito. But the question is, will all of a sudden Richie Porte start to open up the gas for Chris Froome?
Change at the front. We've got Richie Porte now. They've picked up Pierre Roland. Kennog gave it his last throws there as the effort was enough. Now it's all down to, as I said earlier, Porte will be the last man standing now to help Chris Froome. But can they possibly bring this man back? If he wins the day by 17 seconds, he'll win the yellow jersey.
Yeah, but when you've got a teammate like Richie Porte and the experience of Richie Porte, who's finished in 7th place in the overall standings in the Giro d'Italia, who's been a stalwart for the team over the last couple of seasons, they have worked together as one. Chris Froome in 2nd position at the back end of the main field, right behind his teammate Richie Porte. Now, it's something that these two riders, Phil, have practiced in training throughout the whole of this year, building up for the month of July to get themselves ready.
And it looks to me as though Cadel Evans has cracked and Andy Schleck has cracked, two of the team leaders, and it's all because of this sensational 23-year-old Colombian, Nairo Quintana. The panic is caused in that group. It is cracking the whole field here in the Tour de France. And this young man, his face is a picture to see, is destroying men 10 and 12 years older than him.
And two youngsters from Garmin Sharp also disappearing from the group at the front end of this race, because just in front of us there, the youngster Andrew Talansky from the United States, his Irish teammate there, Dan Martin. They've all been put on the back foot here this afternoon because of the infernal chase, the pace that is being set by Team Sky to chase down a 23-year-old Colombian rider. This is Richie Porte from Tasmania, Australia on the front. He's not even looking round, asking anybody for help here this afternoon. He's got Chris Froome, the big pre-race favourite, on his wheel. All they're doing is setting the tempo that they've done so many times in training leading up to the month of July.
Richie Porte heads the charge for Chris Froome. Of the other favourites, Alberto Contador is still there, and so too is Alejandro Valverde, but Valverde is on the same team as the rider up front, so he's getting more or less a free ride today. Now being dropped here from the group is Jean-Christophe Perrault. He's the leader of the French team AG2R. This is Michael Rogers, the strong support man, the Richie Porte of the Saxo Tinkoff team, if you like to look after Contador. He's now being cracked as well. This is an amazing ride to Axley-Turn this year.
I have a feeling, Phil, that Team Sky have been in complete control of what they needed to do. The big leaders of this race are being eliminated. Igor Anton of Euskaltel Euskadi now disappears. Alejandro Valverde in 3rd position there of Spain is just hanging onto the wheel of the two Sky riders. Behind him, it's Alberto Contador just trying to stay in contact. And I think I might just have noticed Joaquim Rodriguez, the Spanish rider on Team Katusha.
Well, Rodriguez, we've never thought him as a man for the overall, but he's showing well here at the moment. Richie Porte, the Tasmanian cyclist, on the same team as Chris Froome, who was born in Africa. These two riders ride for the British Sky team. We are down, Paul, to 5 riders here against 1 up front. Boy, this has ripped the Tour apart. what a ride this has been by Richie Porte, the Australian on the British Sky Squad, to bring this man back to heel. Quintana's looked over. He's seeing them coming, looking for the 5 kilometre to go banner. Very select group. When he left the peloton behind, there was 50 riders. Now there's just 5 of them getting up to him.
Well, that was a brave move by this young man, 23 years of age. He's learned a little bit about the Tour de France this year. Wait until the final climb of the day. Now you can see the acceleration. Porte is dragging Froome away from Alberto Contador, Roman Kreuziger, and also they're pulling away from Alejandro Valverde. Froome is just struggling to stay in the wheel of Richie Porte.
There is Contador, but it's his teammate Kreuziger who is nearer to the 2 from Sky. And now they know this is chips down and showdown time.
Contador is now on the back foot. He's got his back against the ropes as we see the acceleration coming from Chris Froome. Now the hammer is down.
Only the man who's been setting the pace, Quintana, can keep up at the moment with Chris Froome. The rest have been blown away. They've all been riding in what we call the red zone, and now it is Chris Froome. He's not just riding to win the stage, he's riding to win the Tour de France.
Phil, he has been itching for this first move of the Tour de France. He's been sitting in that pack for the first 7 days of the race, waiting for the mountains to arrive.
Richie Porte takes a look at Quintana, checks him out, takes his back wheel. He doesn't need to make the pace anymore now because his team captain has gone up the road here. So he's going to keep an eye on the man from Colombia. While now Chris Froome is out for one reason, to make time, as much time as he can put in the bank on this first day in the Pyrenees.
Cadel Evans, number 31 there, Andy Schleck, they have been discarded. Cadel Evans on the back foot this afternoon as well.
And look at this now, Richie Porte is sensing he's cooked the rider from Colombia. He's going to see if he's got anything left. It's age, I'm afraid. Richie Porte himself being talked about as a future winner of the Tour de France, but not this year. His job is to help Chris Froome this time, but why not finish second? He's going clear.
Look at the position of Alberto Contador. This is not the fluid climber that we saw win the Tour de France on a couple of occasions, or the Giro d'Italia. He is not in a good position here at the moment.
Alejandro Valverde here. As he continues through, we've got just one leader, chased by his teammate now, chased by Quintana. Little acceleration here. Now this looks to me as though Laurens ten Dam has just jumped away from Alberto Contador.
Alberto Contador, if you just look at his position, he's sitting right on the front of his saddle. That's an indication he's not got much power left in those legs of his this afternoon. He is on the defensive. He's just happy to sit on the wheel of his teammate Roman Kreuziger.
Well, that's amazing to see, but Contador, not the man that he was for sure. Go further back down the road and look at the man who won the Tour de France a couple of years ago. Cadel Evans, 31. Pierre Roland, best French finisher, best young rider in the past. All shattered on the climbs, the first 2 climbs of the Pyrenees. And tomorrow, by the way, there are 4 major mountains along the way. And Chris Froome is going to have to defend the yellow jersey.
Well, this is Alejandro Valverde, 121. He's in 3rd place on the road, and he was hoping this year that he would ride himself up into a position to try and climb onto the podium in Paris. He also goes under 3 kilometers to go to the top of the climb. The King of the Mountains point, by the way, is 1.5 kilometers before the finish of the actual race in earnest, because the last 1.5 kilometers, thankfully for these riders, Phil, is reasonably flat.
This is Andy Schleck a bit further down the mountain. He survived better than most in that group, but he's now a little way behind. The flag of Britain in the background, and it's a British rider heading to the top. He's so full of fight. He's just driving on that bike. He's not struggling in the least. He's suffering in silence, but it's all for the good.
Amazing thing about this rider, Phil, when he started off his international career, he actually represented Kenya in the Commonwealth Games. He rocked up there and convinced them to let him participate in the Commonwealth Games for Kenya. He rode the mountain bike race, he rode the individual time trial, and then he rode the road race as well. He is such a rider with so many different abilities in the body that he's got, but now he's really come to the pinnacle of his career.
Well, Chris Froome, a year ago, not quite to the day, it was Bradley Wiggins who was going into the leader's yellow jersey on stage number 7. Here we are on stage number 8. It's the man who had to follow Wiggins around the Tour de France in 2nd place who's going to pull on yellow tonight. And this, in fact, is Bout Mollema at the back here, 164. As we go up to Chris Froome, the leader, 1.6 kilometers very soon. he's going to have to see the best sign in the world when you're leading a stage of the Tour de France. The red triangle in the sky that means 1,000 meters to the end.
Well, that's what he'll be looking for, but before he gets to that point, he will go under the King of the Mountains point and give himself a nice 20 points there. But this man, Richie Porte, as well as the rest of Team Sky, set this up here this afternoon, as they pretty much did 12 months ago. Looking back here at Valverde, he's looking around every corner to see whether or not he can spot the shape of Richie Porte. Well, Richie Porte is now around about 30 seconds ahead of him, but Contador is in all kinds of difficulty on this first climb of the Tour de France.
He can't hold on to his teammate Roman Kreuziger here, who's actually slowed down to wait for him, I think. At the start of the day, Richie Porte and Chris Froome were locked together 8 seconds off the race lead. Now they are first and second on the road, and by the time they get to the top, they'll be first and second on the overall standings.
Just look at the face on Chris Froome. That explains to you what kind of agony he's going through this afternoon, but in a moment that agony will change into joy as he realizes the damage that he's done on the first Pyrenees stage of the Tour de France here this afternoon, because from seconds separating the first 15 or 20 riders, tonight it's going to be minutes.
And remember that Richie Porte has saved nothing to get the springboard working for Chris Froome, yet here he is consolidating his second place on the mountain. Kreuziger here just cajoling Alberto Contador to try and follow his wheel and conserve time. So that's the summit, but it's very close to the last kilometre. That's where the points are given for the climb. And there is the kite in the archway, and now Chris Froome will see it. 1,000 metres to a yellow jersey.
And he will not lay down arms until he gets to the finishing line, because it's so important to get as much time as possible. The Tour de France can be decided by seconds, but for Chris Froome, he's on the flattest part of this mountain here this afternoon. He's getting it up into the biggest gear that he's got. He's getting into a time trial position, keeps looking around those corners saying, where is this line? When is this agony going to finish here this afternoon? He's in the middle of those handlebars, taking it around this left-hand bender. Every time he pedals, he gets that little bit closer to the victory and the yellow jersey at the end of the day.
When Bradley Wiggins took the lead, it was Chris Froome who won the stage last year at La Planche des Belles Filles. And now he's going to do it for himself. He's going to win the stage and take the yellow jersey on stage number 8 of the Tour de France. It's 400 metres to go. He's driving on. He knows that every second counts. He won't let himself slow down till he hits the line, as he's now just around the corner from yellow. Now he'll see the finishing lines. He comes through the S's. He comes off a bend into the finish. He'll kick all of the way. Chris Froome, who has started the Tour as the outstanding favourite, has now put himself head and shoulders above the rest of the riders in this year's Tour de France. This is going to be a stage win and a yellow jersey for Chris Froome. And the clock starts to count. How many seconds will it be to his teammate Richie Porte, who can then also expect to be sitting second overall tonight?
He is a phenomenal professional bike rider, Richie Porte. Finished 7th in the Giro d'Italia at his first attempt, and now he's climbing right up in the rankings with this performance this afternoon.
Always checking to make sure Valverde isn't closing in on him. Almost a minute has gone by since Chris Froome, his team captain, crossed the line. He won't worry about that, because Richie Porte now sits second in the Tour de France.
Amazing performance by him and the team. They really have put pressure. This is Alejandro Valverde just holding on for third position.
Valverde, the outside of a victory, is proving to be the best of the rest here on a different team, and he was almost caught there by, first of all, Bauke Mollema and then Laurens ten Dam.
And then the clock was ticking on Alberto Contador. Coming around the final corner in a group with Nairo Quintana, the man who was expected to be the biggest threat to Chris Froome was struggling to hold his teammate Roman Kreuziger's wheel. Grimacing with the effort it took to edge out Quintana on the line, he immediately looked over his shoulder to check the extent of his losses. 1 minute 45 seconds was the damage. Chris Froome repeating his stage win at the first summit finish last year, but from further out, against a stronger field and by a bigger margin. The closest man to him was his teammate Richie Porte, who finished 51 seconds back, and he was the only man within a minute. Alejandro Valverde was at 1 minute and 8 seconds. The Belkin pair of Bauke Mollema and Laurens ten Dam at 1:10 and 1:16. And Euskaltel's Mikael Nieve finished between them and the Contador group, which also contained Quintana and Igor Anton. Joaquin Rodriguez lost 2 minutes 6, he was 11th. Dan Martin was 15th at 2 minutes 34, coming in with his teammate Andrew Talansky. Andy Schleck 21st at 3 minutes 34. 2011 Tour winner Cadel Evans came in 4 minutes 13 down in 26th place. Daryl Impey rode well in the yellow jersey to limit his losses to under 8 minutes on a day when men like last year's 5th place finisher TJ Van Garderen lost more than 12. The Autobus was an exceptionally long and articulated vehicle today, 94 riders in 3 parts, just under and just over half an hour down. Now this is the part of the post-race protocol Chris Froome is familiar with at the Tour, standing on the podium as a stage winner. We'll see him back there receiving the yellow jersey in a moment after a word from a couple of the riders who helped put him there.
Richie, a phenomenal ride. How worrying was that Quintana move at first?
I mean, it's not worrying at all. I mean, what's he thinking? You know, I think he reads too much into the papers of attacking like that. I mean, we never panicked, and the team did miss a beat. We just, you know, reeled him in nice and slowly. So, I mean, it was just absolutely brilliant teamwork today. Pete was, for me, the ride of the day. I mean, we said to him in the bus we want him to go over the top with us, and I mean, it was just phenomenal. And you know, that's why we brought him in. It's, they're just lucky that G's got a fractured pelvis, you know.
Pretty happy with myself, and obviously the way Froome and Richie were able to finish it off. For me, getting selected for the Tour was a big thing in itself, and I was always a bit nervous about, I don't know how I was going to perform and whether I was going to be able to live up to the job that I had to do. And today I proved that, you know, why I was selected, and it's great for the team and for my own confidence as well.
And Froome now in yellow.
Yeah.
Would you expect that to be the way all the way to Paris now?
Oh, look, I mean, we're not going to be complacent. I think it's a long, long way to go. Still got some really hard stages, but you know, you look at it today, it was, I mean, he's looking good.
It's so easy to commit to Froome just because the way he handles everyone, he has respect for every single rider on the team, no matter what the job is. And you just, every time you go out on your bike, you give it 100% for him because you know you're going to get 100% back from him.
Now, Chris Froome has been on the podium for a stage win at the Tour before, and he's taken leaders' jerseys at other races. But taking the yellow jersey at the Tour de France is a singular experience.
This is the one that counts, Chris. This is what everything's been about.
Definitely. This is where it counts, and this was the main objective of the season, building up until here. So to be standing here wearing this jersey, I feel really honoured.
Chris, I remember this time last year standing opposite your teammate Brad Wiggins at the time, and I think only at this point did the emotion hit him, the momentousness of what he'd achieved.
It's quite hard to take in, but just to think that this is the pinnacle of our cycling calendar, and to be here and have been able to achieve such results today with Richie Porte, myself, first and second, and the team come through the first week in such a good position. We're really happy.
A depth of emotion only matched by the unhappiness of everyone else. Everyone not on Sky, that is. They now have the top 2 places in the Tour. Froome leading Richie Porte with the same margin by which he won the stage. Alejandro Valverde is third at 1:25. Bauke Mollema and Laurens ten Dam are at 1:44 and 1:50, with Alberto Contador and the man who led him home, Roman Kreuziger, another second back. The rider who kicked it all off and now leads the best young rider competition, Nairo Quintana, is 8th.
Sí, ha estado fuerte. Era la idea poder atacar, romper el grupo del Sky y que Alejandro estuviera atento a Froome.
Te veo muy serio. ¿Te vas contento con ese maillot blanco de mejor joven aquí?
Claro que sí, espero mantenerlo hasta París.
¿Dónde vas a plantear el próximo día batalla?
Ya miraremos más adelante.
Well, at least Quintana took the fight to Sky today, even if he paid for it. Joaquin Rodriguez didn't or couldn't, and he's the best of the rest, 9th at just over 2.5 minutes down. Dan Martin is 13th at 2:48. Cadel Evans 23rd, 4 minutes 36 in arrears and already conceding the race.